Okay, good morning and thank you all for coming. I just wanted to start by saying that you'll appreciate that we all have jobs very well ensconced in the investigation and the issue at hand, so please don't be offended when we call the conference to a halt. It's because we want to get on with the task at hand, but we will be available for questions after a few brief introductory comments from each of us. So you know that I'm Mike Clement, and joined again by Scott Gallacher from Ministry for Primary Industries. Also joining us today is Pat Towell from the Ministry of Health, and Pat Towell will have a few comments to make and then also be available for a couple of questions at the end. The police investigation we announced yesterday is progressing well, and we are very encouraged with the response we've had from the public since yesterday's conference. We've been provided with a range of information which is being assessed and fed into the ongoing inquiry, as you'd expect. It is most likely with the public's help that this matter will be brought to a successful conclusion. I would like to make another appeal to the personal people responsible for the threatening letters. We have heard a lot of shock and outrage since yesterday's media conference. And I think that is indicative of the level of feeling out there in the community, and I think it might be also an indication to you about how you got this particular effort to bring notoriety to your cause wrong. With that in mind, I would like that person to do the right thing and make contact with us, either me personally or with the investigation team based in Auckland. We want to hear from you so we can get this matter resolved, prevent further undue fear from mums and dads who may be feeling the consequences of your threat. As I said yesterday, you may not have fully considered the consequences of your letter when you wrote it. You can see now the impact on police, the government, manufacturers, retailers, but most importantly, mums and dads. This is not the way to make your point. So get in touch with us and let's get it sorted out. Finally, I would like to thank all of those who have contacted us with information. As I said yesterday, please let us be the judge of whether the information you hold could be of value to the investigation. We would sooner receive your call, assess it, and discount it rather than not receive it at all. I would also like to acknowledge the media for your understanding and judgment that you have exercised in your reporting of this matter. Can I also give you each a message with regards to anything that you might receive by way of messaging through your own organisations, either directly or particularly via Facebook or other social media pages. Please pass these points on to us so that we can assess them within the investigation team. Thank you. I'll now pass over to Scott.
Look, thank you very much, Mike. So I'm Scott Gallacher, the Deputy Director General with the Ministry for Primary Industries. I think this morning what I would just like to reiterate is that on the back of a huge amount of effort with manufacturers and retailers and a lot of the suppliers and the supply chains, we are confident that the product on the shelves today or leaving our country into export markets is as safe now as it was prior to receiving this threat. And it is a testament to all of the players in the supply chain for giving us this confidence. We stand ready to make sure that the mums and dads and all relevant people get the right information for them to make the right calls and decisions. And as always, one of the things which the Ministry has always placed an emphasis on is for people to be vigilant. And if you have any concerns in terms of any product that's been tampered with or looks like it has been tampered with, do not consume. And then you can contact the Ministry for Primary Industries and also refer to the website foodprotection.govt.nz. That is where you'll get the full range of the right and accurate information. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Pat Towell. I'm a paediatrician and I'm the Chief Advisor in Child Health at the Ministry of Health. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that I really appreciate that parents out there are feeling anxious and angry, and it's appropriate. that they feel angry. However, there are things that they can do to address their own concerns. I think one of the first things they can do is reassure themselves about the safety of the infant formula chain and be able to be reminded that the formula that they're feeding their babies now is as safe as it was before the threat was made. And watching the videos that are available on the foodprotection.govt.nz website will give them a great degree of reassurance, not only about how the industry has taken steps to secure and the production and delivery of infant formula, but also to able to be checked for tampering. And checking for tampering is one of the things that parents can do, and they can do this. It's not hard to do, and it can actually make them feel a lot safer about the formula that they're feeding their babies. I think the other thing to point out is that parents are wondering whether they should be changing the formula that they're giving to their babies or going to cow's milk or some other thing. My main emphasis would be don't change the formula that you are using. If you want to change formula or if you have ongoing concerns, talk to a health professional that you trust. It's easy to contact Plunkett Line or Healthline. If you want to ask someone some questions, they are trained nurses who will be able to help you, or contact your general practitioner for advice. So I'll stop there and be willing to answer any specific questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Previously we've covered stories where humans have had contact with 1080 and there hasn't been any official advice on how somebody should treat themselves or seek treatment if they do come into contact with that person. So what is your advice if the worst happens and someone does come into contact with 1080?
Our advice around this extremely unlikely event is that if parents are concerned about the health of their baby, they should do what they normally do, which is to seek advice from initially Healthline, which is easy to do, or their GP. If they have an extremely unwell baby, they should ring 111 and arrange for the baby to be taken to hospital and assessed. That's the basic advice that I would give to any parent who has concerns about an unwell baby.
Sure, but is there any protocol to dealing with that poison? Is there any framework that the Ministry of Health has put out or the Paediatricians Association has put out for dealing with that poison?
The Ministry of Health has put out a range of advice to primary healthcare practitioners, which include general practitioners, well child nurses, midwives, dietitians, and also to hospital doctors about the identification and management of babies or people who may have been exposed to 1080. The treatment is primarily supportive, and it's the sort of thing that paediatricians in a hospital setting would do every day.
So how much 1080 would be required to, one, hurt an adult, and two, hurt a baby? How much 1080 would you need to put into your body for it to be fatal for an adult and for a baby?
1080 is a very toxic substance. The dose that would be required to cause fatality is in the order of 2 to 5 milligrams per kilogram. So for a baby for a 1-year-old, for example, that's 20 milligrams. 20 milligrams is a small amount. For an adult, it's obviously proportionally larger. However, I reiterate that I understand the question, but it's a theoretical concern at the moment. And my advice would remain that if parents have concerns about their baby being unwell, they should do what they normally do, which is seek advice from a health practitioner.
So 20 milligrams, if that was to go into a sort of 1 kilogram powder, or a bit more than that, so you got sort of 20 milligrams in a 500 ml bottle, would parents be able to taste that? Would the infant formula taste any different with that sort of fatal dose inside a can or inside a bottle?
Our advice is that 1080, or fluoroacetate as its scientific name is not easily discernible by taste or smell or colour or anything like that.
So that has to be a worry as well, because you won't actually be able to tell.
Well, I think it's really important to put that in perspective. The likelihood, as I've said before, that this poison is going to get into the infant formula chain is tiny, and it has been addressed through all of the measures we've taken. And if parents take the appropriate measures to look for tampering, then they can be confident their baby is safe.
If the risk is so low, why make it public in the first place? Overseas, when these sorts of threats are made, they don't make these things public.
And that's true. That's some of the advice that we did take from other jurisdictions, is that they would do exactly that and not make it public. But that's not the path that's been taken in this country. I think it's appropriate to be open with the community at the appropriate time, and that's the pathway that we've taken.
Yeah, but what you do is you obviously raise all these questions that frighten the public unnecessarily if the risk is as low as what everybody says it is.
That's right, and that was one of the considerations that was taken right from the outset.
Well, why didn't you follow the international example?
Well, that's just, we thought it was better to be open with the community about the threat, as small as it is, rather than withhold it from them.
Why?
So, just because on balance it's appropriate that we are open and transparent about the threat at the appropriate time. That's why, I mean, we can argue about the pros and cons of it, but that's the reality of the choice that was taken when all of the factors were considered right across all of the agencies that were involved in the decision.
Well, the other argument against making it public is that you only encourage this sort of behaviour from people that want to make a point.
Yeah. Well, we're certainly warning people that that repeating that type of threat would be most unwise and would only anger people more. So we've been well aware of the pros and cons. We considered them all at the outset, and this is the process that we've chosen to follow in the interests of being transparent with the people of New Zealand and beyond.
Whose decision was to make it? Was it to make it public?
It was a decision across all of the agencies and government.
So it was who drove the decision?
No one drove the decision.
Well, somebody must have made the decision to make it come out.
Well, it was considered across several layers of our organisations in the official sense, and then discussed at the ODESC group, and that was the collective view that was reached, was that it was better to be open and transparent than to withhold it from the community.
Was that
Process
decision
still
made?
required,
When was
but
that
that-
decision made to go to actually not obviously yesterday's, but the decision that it would be made public at some point? When did you make that decision?
Well, I can't give a date, but it was always the intention that we would go public with the threat if we weren't able to find the offender in a reasonable time. And even then, you know, through the transparency of our justice process, we wouldn't be able to necessarily withhold it unless there were suppression orders that were put in place to achieve that.
And was that decision made last week, the week before last, or this year? When was that decision made to go public at some point?
Well, the decision to go public at some point was made right back when the threat was made. The sorting out of the date was reached, finally concluded within the last month or so. So that was intended to be next week.
Yes.
But because the media appropriately became aware of the issue, then we decided to go public yesterday.
And did that decision to go public, did that require sign-off from the Prime Minister? The ODESC decision to go public, did that require political sign-off as well?
To be honest, I don't know if that was the case. As far as I was concerned, that was a process that was reached through a decision was reached through the
Well,
ODESC
you're
process.
central to this decision to go public. Surely you know what arm of government signed it off.
Well, all I can say is what we do is we have a process called ODESC, and that's the level at which I am familiar the decision was made.
Had the media not started asking questions about this, what was the strategy that you had in mind at that time for when you might go public with it?
Very, very much the same as what happened yesterday, only we brought it forward.
When was the plan to release it?
Next week.
Next week.
Yes.
Can I ask some questions about the supply chain? The 40,000 that have been tested, is that every can of formula that can now come to the market, or is there cans of formula on the market that haven't been tested, available that haven't been tested?
Right. So it's quite important for us to work through the supply chain mitigations. So on top of our already quite comprehensive and strong testing regime, which we already have in play in the dairy manufacturing system, we have put in place additional 1080 testing. That has now almost ticked over 45,000 tests. There's some key points in the supply chain that those tests are occurring at the raw milk and then also finished product. And that is to give us the confidence and assurance that we all expect to have, but in particular mums and dads and consumers, that we have clarity that there is no 1080 in any parts of the supply chain. In terms of the comprehensive nature of the tests, that is done on a batch cycle, so we're testing all batches, and as we've already indicated, the testing regime that we've stood up has actually went back to September last year, prior to the threat, where we've been testing through historic samples, and then it's also now in real time. Each day we're doing further testing, and it is all negative, which is why that's just one part of that puzzle. The other important part is all of the security mitigations that manufacturers and retailers have now put in place to make sure they have complete control of the product at each and every stage of the supply chain.
So have 45,000 individual cans of formula been tested, or the batches that lead to those 45,000 being tested?
Yep. So what we have in place is batch testing to make sure we have full confidence across all of the batches that are then used into all parts of the supply chain in terms of infant and other formula. So that's where we've focused upon. But at the same time, if people also reflect upon a lot of the other information which we're sharing, is that we have a full range of mechanisms in place on the manufacturing cycle to give us confidence in terms of the inability for someone to contaminate the tins after and during the manufacturing process. And that's quite important, which is why we wanted to be as proactive as possible in putting out some videos and other information on all the key checks and balances that occur in the manufacturing process.
So just to be clear, it's not actually every can that's been tested, it's the formula that's going into the cans that's been tested, rather than each individual can.
Yes, so it's a comprehensive batch testing regime.
Yep.
From raw milk through to
big's
finished product.
How big's the batch?
That ultimately depends on the manufacturers. Most batches are basically the production run. So when you've got a production run within a secure environment, then that's the batch. The size of the batch varies depending on the size of the plant or the size of the production run that each manufacturer runs on a day-to-day basis. But again, what I'd like to just reiterate is that the testing regime is just one part of the overall security that we have in place across the whole of the manufacturing and supply chain.
And so if I could just boil down further into that process, the 45,000, is that every batch leading to every can has gone through some form of testing now?
Yes.
So if the supermarkets do the dummy cans or whatever and the production chain is secure, a parent knows that has been through some batch testing along a secure production line and not actually on the physical shelf at the supermarket. Is that right?
I think all mums and dads can have the confidence and assurance that a can that they'll be purchasing today or yesterday or next month has undergone rigorous testing, has also undergone rigorous checking throughout the whole supply chain. In particular, it's actually having the vigilance through all the key points of transfer along a supply chain. And that is the true benefit of the opportunity we've had to work with manufacturers and retailers in recent weeks, for them to really think through how they transition the stock through the supply chain, and that at each point we have increased vigilance to ensure that an external outside party cannot undertake a criminal activity to contaminate any product, which is about to be sold here in New Zealand or in the context of any exports.
Sure. Can I ask, do police have any intention of releasing the letter?
As I said yesterday, for the time being, the information we were comfortable with releasing was what it was, but as days go by, we will keep reconsidering what information we're prepared to release through the media to the community.
Are you now,
Do
are you
have
now more
any-
confident of catching whoever's responsible for this now that you've gone public?
Well, I think it's a dimension of the investigation we're very comfortable with reaching out to the public. So we were happy working out of the public eye for the time that we were, but it's very routine, as we did yesterday, is to shift it to a new phase, and that's to appeal to the public. So that allows us now to go and speak with people quite openly about the issue in a way that we couldn't prior to yesterday.
So-
What I'm
is that why
getting
you
at
didn't
is, do you have
actually
more
speak to New Zealand, or
contacts
was it
now
overseas?
Sorry.
as a result of going public?
Sorry,
do
can you start
now-
again? Sorry, I missed.
As a result of going public, do you now have more leads into who may be responsible?
Well, it's early days, but I'm confident that we will get more information from the public. As I said earlier, I think the public will solve this, as they often do with serious investigations.
Do you have any persons of interest?
Overseas or within New Zealand?
Pardon me?
Was the letter sent from overseas or within New Zealand?
From within New Zealand.
And do you have any
Oh.
persons of interest?
My apologies, I probably should put a caveat on that. It came through a New Zealand postal centre.
So do you have any persons of interest in this case?
We have many persons of interest.
Because one of the things that came out yesterday was some of the 1080, the anti-1080 groups
That's
were
right.
saying they haven't been
That's
contacted
right.
by the police. I mean, surely they're a first port of call because they know who the nutters are. Like, why haven't you been talking to the 1080 group and saying who are the crazy guys?
Well,
Sorry
they,
to use layman's terms.
they always don't mind.
Don't they know where the whack jobs are that might be doing this?
Well, absolutely, that's the whole point of going public, is that now allows us to move into a phase where we can be proactive and approach people. What we were endeavouring to do before we went public was to carry out the investigation in a way out of the public eye, which meant not approaching those people.
So you hadn't actually approached any 1080 people or any people who've been writing letters to the editors down the years or whatever? You hadn't actually approached any of them as of yesterday?
What I'd say was we were very circumspect until yesterday about the people we approached with regard to the threats.
So you had gone to some crazy, you had gone to some of these known crazies and said, is it you? I mean,
We had approached people that we had a degree of confidence we could retain the confidential nature of the investigation up until
So if
yesterday.
you went to these nutters, obviously, you're worried that it would get out?
Yeah.
Well, we were working out of the public eye, so you can put whatever spin on that you wish.
Well, that's what you're saying.
What I've said to you is that we were very circumspect about the people that we were approaching up until yesterday. The people that you're probably speaking of today, those people that have a passionate interest in 1080 and any other dimension of the threat, we are more than happy to and will approach from yesterday,
But
and
have-
have been already.
But have you formally interviewed anybody as a suspect?
I'm not prepared to comment on who we've interviewed as a person of interest
Has
in
there
the
been
investigation.
surveillance of any sort, covert or otherwise, of these kinds of people?
I'm not prepared to comment on the techniques that we've applied up until today.
Has
Will you
MPI,
let
has
us know
MPI
whether-
received any signal that there might be bans on products from any countries? Has there been any response?
Well, I think what we've seen, and we're obviously very much monitoring this in the last 12 to 24 hours, is that the overseas markets and regulators that we've reached out to and talked to, they are responding in a very calm way, and we very much appreciate the way in which people have responded to that. The most important thing from our perspective is making sure that we're giving the overseas markets the sort of information they're asking for and the level of assurance. And clearly what we're wanting to do is able to convey to them the underpinning rationale as to why we can stand in front of yourselves and the public to say that the product in play in New Zealand today is as safe as it was prior to this threat. And we're providing all of the information that we've been providing yourselves to overseas markets. And again, over the last 12 to 24 hours, we've very much appreciated the way in which those markets have responded in a calm and measured
So
way.
no bans or anything yet, or any signals of bans?
I think it's been very positive in terms of the way markets have responded to the information we've
Can you
shared.
just answer the question, though, have there been any threats of putting in a ban? Because countries like Sri Lanka, it's pretty well known, have used these types of events as leverage to try and push our exporters out.
I think at this stage, as of this morning, I can say that all the markets we've been talking to and engaging with are still allowing the product through, and they're still focused upon asking us some questions, and we're focused on giving them the right sort of information.
And
Are
so
you
what sort of
aware of
level of
the
interest
Are you aware of the AQ, SIQ in China saying that they are upping their checks on New Zealand milk product?
Yes, and that's something in which we're working with our counterparts in China, responding to their questions. And clearly, I think what has been fundamental in terms of the overall response we've been seeing is the effort that we've been able to do for the last couple of months with manufacturers and retailers to put in place such a high level of mitigations and measures so that the government can stand shoulder to shoulder with the manufacturers and retailers to demonstrate to overseas markets and mums and dads that we have every confidence in the product that is in play today.
Because
Scott,
the AQ, SIQ, that is the most crucial relationship in the export market for dairy product. What is the AQ, SIQ asking of New Zealand?
Well, I think the information which they're asking is the information which you yourselves are asking, is, what is the underpinnings of the confidence that the New Zealand government has in the product that we're either consuming today in New Zealand or exporting to overseas markets. And we're in the process of sharing that information, and we've been very proactive working with all of our counterparts around the globe today to make sure they can share our confidence in the product that we export into a lot of markets for mums and dads around the world.
And could we see a scenario where the AQ, SIQ puts its own checks in at the China end, or the AQ, SIQ puts a stop on New Zealand dairy product? Can you rule those two things out?
Look, fundamentally, I mean, that's what sovereign governments may decide to do, but what we're focused upon is working with all governments in a constructive, positive and collaborative way for them to make the right decisions that they need to make for their own consumers.
Because you're working with the AQ, SIQ, so what are they saying? Are they saying they could put their own tests in? Are they saying they could ban New Zealand product? What are they actually saying?
Well, I think at this stage, we're in the midst of a conversation with our colleagues in not just China, but overseas. And it would be somewhat inappropriate for me to be talking about that when we're trying to make sure we're giving everyone as much information so they can make the right informed decisions off the back of the right and accurate information which we're providing them.
And how long ago did you start talking with the AQ, SIQ? How many weeks? Because we know you've talked with them in advance. How many weeks ago did you start talking with the AQ, SIQ about this?
We've been in discussions on the back of us reaching out to the manufacturers and retailers to put in place the sort of mitigations and measures which we expect to have in place and which we now have. We have been working with the likes of AQ, SIQ and other counterparts around the world so they can be aware of what the manufacturers and retailers have been doing in response to our requests.
When did those conversations with AQ, SIQ start? That's my question. When did you start talking to AQ?
Within the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Scott,
Can I just ask you about the 1080 that comes into New Zealand? There's 90% that's stock take has been done. That's animal control products. This is according to the EPA website. Where's the other 10%? Who's got that?
Look, I'm sorry, I don't know whether I'll be able to answer because I'm not aware of the specifics of that information. But obviously, we are aware of the various supply chains for 1080, and clearly we've put on the website in terms of foodprotection.govt some further background information on 1080. But in terms of the specifics, I'm sorry, I don't have that information to hand in terms of that.
Can you tell us how many
1080
companies have
mail
licenses?
threats in the past that may not have seemed significant at the time that police are looking into now?
Absolutely. So there have been, and you'll be familiar with this, some previous threats, indications, attitudes demonstrated in various ways with regard to 1080, and so they are all part of the investigation.
Can police say how easy it is for public to access significant amounts of 1080 if they wanted?
Well, and from my understanding, it's not easy at all. It's a regulated product, but certainly it's a dominant feature of our investigation is trying to isolate the sources into New Zealand and therefore accessibility to New Zealanders of 1080.
Because this person has some, that's a fact.
There's no question about that. There is 1080 in the samples that are attached to the
So
letters.
that's an obvious line of inquiry, isn't it? If it's a restricted material, that you're able to go back and try and see where this person's got it from.
That's right.
Have all the companies who can import the 1080 been contacted?
It's a dominant feature of our investigation.
Is it possible, is there any kind of black market?
I can't comment on that at the moment. Our investigation hasn't exposed that as one of the issues thus far, but I can't rule it out.
Have 1080 drops ceased since this investigation got underway? Has there been any stop from the government departments dropping this product?
I can't comment.
Doc or otherwise?
As far as I understand, is that any operations that were previously planned were being undertaken, but for a whole raft of operational reasons. They've continued or they've had to be delayed for a number of reasons outside of this threat. But again, that's probably something we need to come back to you on, because clearly that's something in terms of the organisations who are responsible for that are not here this morning, and obviously that's some information which would be able to be shared at some stage.
That is another way, though, isn't it, that this person could have got 1080 from being a hunter and that kind of person that we know is against it out in the field, literally grabbing a small sample from out in the bush. Is that another way, Deputy Commissioner, that this person could have got this poison?
Absolutely. So we've been very focused on trying to identify what the source of the 1080 could be, and I can't rule that out.
But then how can't you rule it out, given that the stuff that's dropped was coloured? It's a coloured pellet, and the stuff that you received was white.
Yeah. Well, all I can do is I can explain it from the perspective of the ESR analysts, and that is that we haven't been able to isolate the source of the 1080.
Yeah, but it's a different colour to the pellets that have dropped.
That may well be true, but there
So
might be something.
How can you say what you've just said?
There might be something that they can do in the process of removing the 1080 from a pellet and refining it into a product that was sent through the mail. So I can't rule out anything in terms of a source of the 1080. If I could, I would. I just can't.
Are you saying that this potential criminal could be quite sophisticated in their use of the 1080?
Well, all of the options are open given that I can't isolate the source of the 1080. So the answer to that is yes.
All right, we're running out of time. One more question, people.
Do you think this actually is 1080 activists, or could it be another group with another purpose, and this is a red herring?
Oh, we're keeping our minds completely open with regard to the motivation of the offender.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, people.
Back tomorrow, I think, I will.
So the intention